So, first of all, how do we know that we have a purpose? And how do we know that there is more potential to us than we already have experienced? It's actually a compliment to the human condition, to the human being, that we have this sense of purpose and we never feel like we have lived up to our purpose, to our fullest potential. Because what do you do then? What if you were perfect, God forbid? Then what would you do? So we have the humility that tells us that there's always more to do. And we have the sensitivity to know that what we are meant to do is the purpose for which we were created. So the word purpose is really a very spiritual word. If the Creator has no plan, intention, vision, if there isn't a vast eternal plan for which God created the world, then we don't have a purpose. Because if you're not created purposefully, then you do not exist for a purpose. And then it wouldn't make sense to make up a purpose. You can make up a plan. You can say, here's my plan for life. Here's what I want to succeed at. Here's what I want to accomplish. Doesn't mean that's your purpose. So the purpose has to exist before the product. You can't make a car and then think what is its purpose, because it might not turn out to be a car. You have the purpose first, then you produce the car. First there's a purpose, then you are born out of that purpose. So when you say, what is my purpose? You don't really mean my purpose. You mean, what is God's purpose in creating me? Like saying, what is my mission? You can't give yourself a mission. You can't give yourself marching orders. There has to be someone in authority who knows what has to happen, who can give you your particular mission in this vast eternal plan. But it's true. Every creation, every detail in this universe was created with a purpose, a divine purpose, which means that without that purpose, there would be no justification for our existence. So let's look at it from another angle. When a person says, what's the purpose of life? What you're actually saying is, life is not justified. Life should not exist unless there's a purpose, unless living fulfills some purpose. Living is not justified by itself. So the question is, why do you need a purpose? Why does life have to have a purpose? Just live, enjoy, and make the best of it. Why are we always looking for a purpose? And we've been doing it throughout all of history. There was never a time that people didn't ask, what's the purpose? Why am I here? Today, literally in the last couple of years, the question has become more popular and more urgent. Even children are asking, why am I here? I didn't ask to be born. Sounds a little scary, but it's not. It's just a really good question. Interestingly, the people who ask this question are usually the affluent, those who have time to sit and ponder. Those who are struggling to make a living and put bread on the table don't have time for these kinds of questions. Never mind the purpose, just how do I stay alive? But once staying alive is not a challenge, now you have time to sit and think, and your first question is going to be, who needs this? What's it all for? So it's not surprising that the people who ask for a purpose to their lives have comfortable lives. Now, if you have a comfortable life, what do you need a purpose for? You're doing fine, you're enjoying, you're successful, you've got everything you might want. Why are you looking for trouble? Why are you asking for the purpose? Must be because we are, in fact, created out of a purpose. So purposeful is the nature of our existence. We do, in fact, exist for a purpose. And we're sensitive enough to recognize that. So, of course, now the question is, what is that purpose? You know the famous quote of the American patriot, give me liberty or give me death. If I can't live in freedom, then I would rather not live. Well, that's not a very Jewish sentiment, because for most of our history, we had no liberty. So if we had that attitude, we would have been gone a long time ago. Liberty is not a condition for our lives. We've lived without it. We've lived in poverty. We lived in discriminatory circumstances where we could not vote and we could not own property and we could not go to college and we could not have a profession. So we had to become peddlers and live in restricted areas, ghettos. But we lived. The one condition we have for living is that life must be purposeful. Without purpose, we would rather not live. To live a purposeless life is torture. In other words, does my life make a difference in the big picture? Because if it doesn't, then I quit. Give me purpose and I can live. Without purpose, I can't. I can't. That's a compliment to us. We are, in fact, purposeful creatures. That's why in the Torah, the first words of the Torah, the first words in the Bible, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. And the commentaries and the sages immediately respond with, for what purpose? And the answer is, to bring God down to earth. We were created to bring God down to earth. But look at the question that they immediately are responding to. As soon as you hear the words, God created heaven and earth, the immediate question is, why? Not how. I really don't care how. It's not like I want to create a world also, and I just need to know how. Not how. Why? For what purpose? Which shows that purpose is a very big subject in creation. It's a crucial feature in creation, because without a purpose, there's no justification for any of this. For our existence, for the existence of animals, plants, minerals, planets, nothing is necessary if there isn't a purpose. The major contribution of the Torah that God gave us at Mount Sinai is that it tells us why. It tells us the purpose for which we exist. And that's why we need to have this conversation and many such conversations. So, number one, purpose is not optional. It's not like you can live without purpose and just enjoy yourself, or you can become philosophical and talk about purpose. No, purpose is an essential, indispensable part of existing. Because to exist without purpose is painful. There was a young woman many years ago who told me in no uncertain terms that she has it all planned out on how she's going to kill herself. God forbid. And the reason she's going to kill herself is because life is absolutely meaningless. Totally meaningless. So being inexperienced, naive yeshiva boy, I said, really? Everything is meaningless? She said, yes. I said, nothing has any meaning? She says, no. I said, then why do you need to kill yourself? Sit quietly, get old, and you'll die sooner or later. What's this need to kill yourself? It's all meaningless. I thought that was a really good question. What is this drive, this urgency to kill yourself? If life is meaningless, then what's the problem? But it is a problem. A person who thinks their life is meaningless cannot stand to exist. To exist without a reason is more disturbing than existing without freedom. Now, why is it that way? So, sure, if there are terrible difficulties and you're experiencing a lot of pain, okay, then I understand. Life is not justified, it's too painful. But when it's not painful, what is your problem? Why can't you live without a purpose? Just live with a few dollars in your pocket and go have some fun. Can't. Go into a depression, we become suicidal. What is this big deal? So we need to know, number one, that the purpose of life is real. We need to know that the purpose of life is indispensable. You can't have life without it. And then, of course, we need to know what our purpose is. And in that, there are two parts. One is the general purpose that we all share in common because we're all human beings. And then there's the individual purpose. What about me as an individual? This one is a butcher. This one is a baker. What is the purpose in being a butcher? What is the purpose in being a baker? Or should the baker become a butcher and the butcher should become a baker? Or should they both stop what they're doing and become an Indian chief? So, for example, all Jews have a common purpose: to practice Judaism. But if we're all doing the same thing, what do you need me for? If you have 14 or 15 million Jews who are doing mitzvahs, you really need me? You already have a minyan. So what is my individual purpose within the general purpose of keeping the mitzvot? So here's something to think about as the first installation on this topic. How do you know when you have found the purpose? So when I say I need money, you can very legitimately, justifiably ask me, for what? You need money for what? Because money itself is not the purpose. Well, I need money to buy a car. Okay. I can legitimately ask, what do you need a car for? You tell me because I need to get downtown and I hate taking buses. Okay. Now I can legitimately ask you, why do you need to go downtown? You tell me you have to go downtown because that's where your job is. I can legitimately ask you, why do you need a job? And you'll tell me because you have to pay bills, mortgage, taxes. I can ask you, why do you need to have a house and pay mortgage? And you can say, well, without a house, I have to live on the streets. Or worse, have to live at home with my parents. And that's not acceptable. So, well, why is that not acceptable? Why do you have to have a house? Because life in the streets is dangerous. You need a home to be secure and to be safe. Why? Because otherwise you could get sick and die. And you don't want to do that? No. Why? Because I have to live. Why? Here's my point. If there is a why, then you have not yet reached your purpose. The definition of purpose is This is where the buck stops. When I find out what my purpose is, I can no longer ask why. Because if there is a why, then the why is my purpose and not this. You can't say your purpose for money is to have a car, because having a car needs a purpose. So when have I arrived at the purpose? When I can't ask why anymore. For most people, if you ask them, why do you want to live? They don't know. They shouldn't know. If you're living only for some other purpose, then life is not essential. The purposeful life is the essential thing. And that's why there are people who will kill themselves for a cause, because they find the cause more important than life itself. So when we discover our purpose, we have discovered something that does not need a purpose. It is the purpose. So anything that is not the purpose will need a purpose. Anything that exists other than the purpose needs to be justified. But that which is your purpose doesn't need justification. The buck stops there. Which tells us something about the Creator. God creates the world for a purpose. Why? See, you can't do that. Why means, what is the purpose for having this purpose? And that's ridiculous. Once we discover what God's purpose is, there are no further questions. Because there is no greater purpose than the purpose. So we have arrived at something that is absolutely true. It doesn't exist for a purpose, it is the purpose. That's what we mean when we say God is true and the Torah is true. We don't mean that it's honest. It's not much of a compliment. When we say Torah is true, we mean Torah does not need justification. If you buy a car, you need justification. You buy a house, you need justification. You go on a trip, you need justification. But if you're a Jewish man and you put on tefillin, no need, no justification. You put on tefillin. Why did you do it? In a romantic sense, if a man says to a woman, I love you, and she says, for what? For what? I love you. Yeah, for what? There is no for what. You're the for what. You are the objective. Yeah, well, what'll that do for you? It doesn't have to do anything for me. You're not a means to an end. You are the end. Yeah, but for what? Well, don't do that. Doesn't everything have to have a purpose? Yes, except the purpose. Does that make sense? The purpose doesn't have to have a purpose. The reason you exist doesn't have to have a reason. It is the reason. That's why it'd be so nice to know what our purpose is. So let me give you one example. There was a man in Canada many years ago, in Montreal, who came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn, who was a holy man, a man with great insight, and he said to the Rebbe, "What is my purpose?" He wasn't asking, "What is my purpose as a Jew?" He knew the answer to that. And he was practicing, he was doing mitzvahs. What he was asking is, "What is my individual purpose?" Now, this man was a pharmacist, and he had a very popular drugstore in Montreal. At that time, there was an unspoken rule in Canada that a pharmacy, a drugstore, has to be open every day of the week, all night long, in case of an emergency. So it was very difficult for a Jew to keep the store closed on Shabbos because that was considered a health hazard. What if somebody needs medicine? So when this man asked the Rebbe, "What is my purpose as a Jew and as a pharmacist?" the Rebbe said, "To destroy this myth that you cannot keep Shabbos if you're a pharmacist, so that from you onward, every Jewish pharmacist will be able to keep Shabbat." And sure enough, he started closing the drugstore on Shabbos, and it became totally acceptable all over Canada for a drugstore to be closed on the weekend. So we ask ourselves, I am in a certain business, I'm in a certain profession, I'm in a certain financial economic bracket. Why? What is the purpose of all of that? And if we find an answer, our existence becomes so much more enjoyable, so much more directed, so much more effective. Everything works when we know where we're going and what we're doing. So it is really, really essential to discover our purpose.
All right. I think that's a good place to pause. First of all, thank you, Rabbi Friedman, so much for your time. We're so lucky to have you here with us, explaining all of these essential, integral parts of our lives. Again, keep an eye on your inboxes after this call is over. You should be getting an email with a discount code to join the upcoming 4-part course. We hope to see you all there for even more wisdom and life-changing lessons. Thank you, Rabbi Friedman, and thank you all 150 plus participants for being here and for taking the next step in making this world a place for God.
There is a purpose. The sooner we get around to it, the better the world will be. Thank you all very much.